So you made a Kyle. I hope you don't have any regrets about that, despite the recent changes, but I think we all knew that it was coming. That aside, this video is meant to provide you foundational building blocks you need to release his potential as a valuable descendant in your roster without crazy investment. As of recording, I think I have about 100 hours on Kyle. I've done every dungeon, every reactor boss, all void intercepts, and the majority of the time was just spent in the overworld doing missions as an all-purpose boss killer. I think Kyle excels at staying healthy while dealing very significant skill damage, which allows you to skip a major pain point of running out of ammo and dying, which doesn't necessarily apply to him very often. However, the playstyle necessitates staying in close quarters, which is much easier said than done on some fights. There are a handful of elite mob types that will just absolutely shred you if you stand anywhere near them because of their shotgun type weapons. And this is especially the case when you're solo and they have flawless tracking. There are also a handful of arenas with overhead obstacles that will nullify the usefulness of your thrusters unless you adapt your build with enough range to work around that. With this in mind, you have to be clever and adapt to the environment at all times, but I assure you, Kyle is capable of literally tackling anything you need. So let's just jump right into what you need to make Kyle work. I think the biggest tool, the biggest secret, is the Secret Garden. Now, why is Secret Garden so good? Right here. I have a fully upgraded one. I can't show you a base one for comparison, but this is what you get for making 5 of them. 39% chance on using a dimension skill to recover 10% of your custom resource, which is your magnetic force, and 50% chance on using a tech skill to get a 10-second buff that increases your firearm attack and skill power. You can hold up to 3 charges of this, meaning you have a 50% chance every time you use your shoulder tackle to get a buff. It is possible for this to fall off because 50% is not always 50%, at least it doesn't feel like it. And even with 90% cooldown, this will sometimes fall off, so it's not as foolproof as it seems, but this part of it is extremely good. All in all, this gun was made for Kyle. Secret Garden is sort of essential to his identity. It never leaves his hands. It's too good to not use as well. Um, this is what I'm using right now. I don't think it's perfect. It's just what felt correct. With the buffs that they gave the gun, the crit rate is absolutely insane. The critical hit damage is very respectable. So I think they're I'm correct in some spots and incorrect in others. The weak point's not the best, so I don't really bother scaling that, but I've got the obvious firearm attack increases, critical hit damage, critical hit rate, critical hit rate, critical hit damage. 84% chance of critting and every single bit of critical hit damage I can get. I could even make the fire rate critical hit damage, but who really cares? So this is what I'm using 99% of the time. This is just a mob killer, and this is just popping tubes and that sort of thing. Now your reactors. This is what I walk around with. I don't necessarily think it's the best. I admit I like using it because it's got yellow numbers on it. If I was being smart, I would be using this one all the time because it's got the 2 lines I actually want for just walking around, but they're not yellow, so it's ugly and I hate it. When I'm fighting a boss, I use this reactor, however. This is the most damage I'm able to get, and unless a good spot comes around again for the Secret Garden type reactors to roll, I don't think I'll ever beat this. As far as this one's concerned, this is my mobbing reactor. The little bit of skill effect range is really nice to get up to the 200% cap that he has, and the non-attribute applies to everything, which is just great. And I only hold on to this in hopes that one day they give him more than a 5% skill critical hit rate. Using that right now is just pointless, stupid. Anyway, the modules, the meat and potatoes. With this build here, specifically for Colossus, I have it maxed out, obviously. I haven't formatted every single slot because this is what I found to be just about right. Let's take this build and strip it down bit by bit back into a 60-point build. Take out the luxury items one by one. Well, luxury item number one, auto immunity. That's just don't really need it. Just something I put in there because I had 11 points, right? Spear and shield is a 16-point mod typically. You know, if I didn't analyze for it. So let's pretend like spear and shield would be my next takeout. Take out dangerous ambush. That is the next move. And then probably remove focus on tech. This technically pretend this is a 6-point mod. The extra skill power modifier really doesn't do anything, but I would still say take this out. Okay? We're getting close now. Now, 2 HP mods. That's luxury. You don't need that. Get rid of the lower one. Okay, so let's pretend like none of this is catalyzed. Yeah, okay. Actually, this works out perfectly. All right, so we're at a 54-point build, right? And this is normally a 12-point mod. So this is a 60-point build without energy activators and without this involved. It has no influence on it. So this is where you go. This is the building blocks. This is where you want to be if you have a Kyle fresh out of the box, because there's 2 Malachite slots to begin with when you get the character. So this is a real thing. These are both going to be on here. Nimble Fingers will be part of your build, but since it's only 12, you can fit it in pretty cheap. So what are your first choices for Catalyst? Well, you're always going to look at the 16-point stuff that you're not going to remove. So let's say Catalyst 1, boom, Stim Accelerant. You've got 8 points to work with. This is where you go back to focus on tech. Probably. Yeah, focus on tech for more skill cooldown. You want that 6.1% back. And you don't care about the skill power modifier, but good news is you really don't need to level it up. So I'm going to put this in and pretend like it's a 6-point skill. We're at a 58-point build. 58-point build out of 60. So we have no room for anything anymore. We could level up our focus on tech a little bit and fill that gap, but I wouldn't recommend it. So until you level up to 40 again, then you go increase shield into a catalyst slot. Now you're talking about a 52-point build, and you've got 8 points to spare. What do you do with your 8 points? Well, I'd say take focus on tech back out. What do you do with 16 points? This is where you either get ambush if you're doing Colossus, or multi-talented if you're doing general overworld stuff. The reason multi-talented is so good is the very first line there. When using a dimension skill cooldown minus 20%. If you aren't aware, skill cooldown is capped at 90%. This will get you to skill cooldown cap. So let's just save this real quick. So we're at 68.2, right? 68.2. And you have 16 points to spare. Yeah, you can fit that in. Now, when you hit a dimension skill, you're going to be at 88.7. You don't even need to worry about cooldown. You could just skip focus on tech. If you want to take it even further, this is where it sort of gets in the weeds, where you're kind of spending a lot of money. But I'd say you just keep nimble fingers on because you kind of have to, right? Okay, so nimble fingers is still on. You got 11 points to work with. What do you do with 11 points? Well, you could bring back in focus on tech to bring you properly up to skill cooldown cap when just general walking around more skill cooldown. So let's say it's a 55-point build, right? Pretty good. There's really not a whole lot more you can do to scale more damage besides starting to bring in stuff like spear and shield or swapping multi-talented out for ambush. At this point, you have the overhead to do that. You could just go from multi-talented to ambush and still be under the 60 points. And then just have those 2 builds for Ambush for Colossus, and Multi-Talented for Open World, right? That's perfectly valid, I think. But if you want to take it even further, these two catalyst slots I think are the spoiler for where I go from here. You add another HP mod and you add Spear and Shield, and the order in which you add them doesn't really matter. I think they're both 16-point mods, so you'd have to just start catalyzing stuff. You'd have to add the energy activator and then slap in HP, or you'd have to start getting real specific. It's at this point where if you decide to go a little bit further when you're sitting at this point and you're not sure if you really like Kyle or not, this is where you should stop. This is where it goes from tourist to enthusiast. You know what I mean? 3 Malachite slots and 2 Cerulean is probably the peak of usefulness for Kyle before you go into energy activated territory. And here is a quick peek at what I use for general bossing. The big difference between this page and the Colossus page is multi-talented instead of ambush, and the addition of skill expansion. Skill expansion is actually very important to making Kyle feel good. Um, Anytime you're fighting something indoors, you have a chance of bonking your head on the ceiling when you rise, and the 5 meter damage range isn't doing you any favors. Skill expansion alone brings it up to nearly 10, and you can take it another 100% with something like maximize range, but at that point you are sacrificing damage because it has the same polarity slot as spear and shield. Now, if you're fighting something where you really don't think you need spear and shield, that's where the AoE build comes in. You swap maximize range in for spear and shield, and the build really stays the same beside that. I'm not sure if arc acceleration actually works on Kyle, but there really isn't anything else to put there, and I figured it was appropriate for a maximum range build. Autoimmunity is underrated, I feel like, but either or. Let me show you what I'm working with for external components on this build. Uh, Most of them I think are pretty much near perfect what I want. I'm gonna go in reverse order and save the worst for last. Uh, Shield. Shield is important on Kyle, but I don't think you should overinvest on it. I think it makes sense to have one innate shield and obviously a max rolled shield and shield recovery modifier. These are exactly what you want to see, just as close to gold as you can get on every single one. Defense. I think you need at least one piece with defense. And what better piece than the piece that also rolls defense within its pool? This is a nice, huge stat stick and gives me just enough defense to feel like I'm doing enough with the 150% buff that Kyle has. Shield recovery in combat is very appreciated. Now, this piece, I think this is exactly what I want. Max HP, shield recovery out of combat, and chill resistance. Chill resistance, uh, I'm not sure if it exactly prevents frostbite stacks from accumulating, but I'm assuming it does. Either way, it's definitely the most annoying status to have applied to you, so I think having chill resistance is smart. Now this piece. I've struggled to find something better, but it is what it is. I just wanted something with max HP innate and a really good max HP roll. My last piece on here, I probably would go for fire resist just because I don't think there's anything better in the pool, but it works. I look at my HP amount. I've got 18,702. I could have another 100 base HP, multiplying that another. I could probably be in 19,000 ish. I don't know. Like, do I need it? I don't know. I'm not gonna die normally. Gluttony can still get me sometimes, but it is what it is. Yeah. With all that combined, 20,000 defense with under Q that goes up to like 50,000 or something. 4,000 shield, just enough to have decent amount, um, so that magnetic care does something. You know, I don't want to have too much shield so it never breaks. I do want it to break occasionally just to give me magnetic force back. It is handy having a big bar of magnetic force I can just use for either popping my ultimate or shielding myself, whatever my need may be. So I think I found the perfect balance there, in my opinion. But you can play with it. You can figure out where you want to be. The external components are sort of you take what you can get. Anyway, I think that pretty much sums it up. I don't know if there's more that I need to talk about. I don't want to make this video too long. I don't want to drag it out, but I did mostly record this in one take and then just slap it together with minimal editing. So if I miss something, please leave a comment. Ask any question. I'll get to it as soon as I can. And I hope this is helpful to somebody out there trying to use their Kyle for more than just a little bit of mastery rank.